Hey there. Over the past few weeks, the Trump administration has taken a series of steps to escalate tensions with Venezuela. On March 26, President Maduro was indicted in the United States as a drug trafficker. On March 31st, the U.S. State Department issued yet another transition plan/ultimatum requiring Venezuela's government to resign. Finally, on April 1st, against the wishes of a military leadership that is more focused on dealing with COVID-19, Trump announced a new deployment of ships to the Caribbean, focusing on exactly the drug trafficking that Maduro has just been accused of. It sure looks like the United States is about to use a pandemic as cover for a full-scale invasion of Venezuela. Many of you are alarmed about this, both in comments on these videos and on Twitter. And you're absolutely right to be. But I'm not quite there yet. What I think is much more likely is something we've already seen a number of times in this administration's Venezuela policy. A lot of very strong intimidation moves and some very angry language that eventually falls apart in humiliating fashion. Today I want to talk about one of the reasons why I think this outcome is more likely. Venezuela is not Panama. Panama is the reason that the geriatric cold warriors Trump employs assume that the military is a useful tool to use against Latin American governments. In 2 months, back in 1989 and 1990, the U.S. military invaded Panama and quickly met all of its objectives. Manuel Noriega, Panama's dictator at the time, spent the rest of his life in prisons in 3 countries, dying in 2017. By declaring Maduro a drug trafficker, the Trump administration is very consciously threatening Venezuela's president with the Panama experience. But I think this is more about intimidation than the actual possibility of invasion. Washington, D.C. is a very stupid town, and the Trump administration is the dumbest and most short-sighted presidential administration we have ever had. So who knows? Maybe a U.S. invasion of Venezuela is a real possibility. But I think there are some considerations here that are so obvious that even Secretary of State Mike Pompeo can see them. Panama's population in 1990 was around 2.5 million. Venezuela's population today is around 32 million. Panama's land area is a little under 30,000 square miles. Venezuela's is over 350,000 square miles. And the territory to be conquered is a lot more complicated too. Panama exists as a country because the United States wanted to build and control a canal on what used to be Colombian territory. From 1903 to 1979, the Panama Canal Zone was actually U.S. territory, and in 1989, it was still filled with U.S. military bases. This obviously made the invasion of Panama a pretty straightforward affair. What's more, Panama City, the capital where Noriega was captured, was right next to all those U.S. military bases. Honestly, California would provide a much more difficult target for invasion for the U.S. military than Panama did. Venezuela looks more like Vietnam. 10 times the population of Panama and 10 times the surface area. 5 cities with over 1 million people, no U.S. bases, and air and sea defenses that are probably poorly run, but do exist. Venezuela's vast country includes mountain ranges and some tropical jungle too. From horrifying urban warfare to the kind of terrain you can last in for decades, Venezuela is an insurgent's fantasy land. The U.S. military doesn't want any of that. And there absolutely would be an insurgency. Manuel Noriega was on the CIA payroll throughout most of the 1970s and the 1980s. Unlike Maduro, he was never elected. The sad fact is that Noriega's main constituency was always the U.S. government. Once we got sick of him, there wasn't much left to hold him up. Now, Maduro is currently quite unpopular, but as much as we hate to admit it, he still has a large minority of Venezuelans that support him. And if we invaded, that would change the politics dramatically. Many Venezuelans would rally to him and support him against the foreign invader, just like any other American would. I don't like Donald Trump, at all, but if Mexico invaded, I'd probably pick up a gun to defend his government. Wouldn't you? Finally, the folks who think Venezuela can be invaded or even easily intimidated are not reckoning with the fact that many of these countries have changed dramatically over the past 30 years. They are richer and more economically diverse now. These countries are no longer run exclusively by white elites who are eager to play along with the US as long as it helps them lord it over impoverished peasants. Some of the new middle classes like pro-US, pro-business policies. Some really do not. Venezuela has shown repeatedly over the past 3 years that these countries are not as easy to coup as they used to be. And when a US-backed coup is successful, as one was in Bolivia this past fall, it tends to do more to hurt US diplomacy than help it. The Organization of American States has been revealed to be exactly the same stooge of the US's most foolish interests that it was 40 years ago. I pointed out in the past the way that the kinds of developments that we've seen in recent weeks actually help Maduro. This US president, who sometimes acts in ways that are so cartoonishly evil that it's like he walked out of 1980s communist propaganda, is probably the main reason that Venezuela's current government is still standing. This most recent attempt to intimidate Maduro just provides more material to distract from his own terrible governance. I really don't think these recent developments are going to change anything at all. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and click on the bell next to the subscribe button to get updates whenever I upload a new video. Thanks.